Hi everybody, it's Marcus Collins from MA Properties, and this month we have our usual 2021-2022 market review, but this month we're going to do the town of Waltham. We've not done Waltham before, but I thought it would be useful to kind of broaden it a little bit and bring in some other towns. And so this month we're going to look at the town of Waltham. There's actually quite a lot to see, as you'll see as we kind of get through this. What we do with this market update is we really give you a sense of what happened in 2021 and then give you the predictions that we have for 2022. So we'll look in depth about what happened in 2021 first and then kind of take it on. So let's get started. Relatively easy to get information today and data. There's a lot of it around, but it's much more difficult really to make sense of it and really to use it to your advantage, which is why we really do take some time to explain, as you'll see as when I carry on with this video, explain what's going on in the market, because we want to understand the details. It's all about the details. Real estate, as everybody says, is local, and so it very much is what's happening in that specific town, in that specific area, in the specific year. So we really do look at the markets that we follow quite obsessively. So I'm going to show you a lot of information. I really want to show you where you can get that information to after this, because we have a lot of information out there for you to kind of mill over and look at. So on our website, if you go to maproperties.com, scroll down a little bit, you'll see a statistics button. Press that and then you will see a whole array of different statistics. Got about 20 different statistics for about 50 different towns. So there's an awful lot of information. This is what the screen looks like as you kind of go in there. There's a lot of information on there, as I say, for about 50 different towns. So if you're looking to perhaps sell and then buy, or if you're looking to buy in a number of different areas, you'll find the information that you need on this website. If you have any questions about some of the data, because there's a lot of it, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be more than willing to kind of talk you through which are the important ones depending on what your circumstances are. So maproperties.com, scroll down a little bit, get to the stats tab, and then you'll see all of this information. So this evening we're going to look at town of Waltham, but we're going to look at a number of different aspects of it. Single family, condominiums, new construction, those three big areas that we see within the town. We'll open up and see exactly what's going on in those different sectors, and then we'll give our 2022 predictions. As best we can. Here we are in mid-February, so it's early days, but I think we can definitely see some trends by looking at what's gone on over the last 10 years or so. So, single family. Almost everything you'll see this evening is going to be a 10-year view. One or two are just like 12 months, but the majority of it's going to be a 10-year, decade-long view. And so we're looking at the trends and what do those trends mean? What do they mean clearly for today, or what happened over the last 12 months and before? But also, what do those trends mean as we kind of begin to look further forward? So let's get started with single families. First thing we'll look at is the inventory levels. Now, so the inventory level is really a snapshot of how many homes are available to buy on the first of the month. So the first of the month I go out and I say, how many homes are there to buy? We've tracked this for many, many years. And here's a decade-long view of it. We can see quite a lot within what you're looking at here. So first thing, which clearly is the obvious thing, is what's going on in that 2012 timeframe. That very, very high inventory level that dropped off quite dramatically as we got into 2013. So this is the end of the so-called crash, the housing crash. We're seeing the end of it. And what happened is it's almost like a light switch went on. The buyers were very reticent to buy in the market. There was an awful lot of homes available to buy. Then as 2013 kicked in, so the buyer confidence increased. And it's almost like it kind of went from 0 to 1. As you can see, the inventory came down as the buyers came into the market and started buying homes. So that's what's going on in that time frame. So it continued. 2017 saw a bit of a low point in the inventory. Lots of buyers coming into the market. And then as we go into 2018 and 2019, you can see the inventory level rose. And actually, as you can see, the cyclic nature, if I kind of show you that again here, that cyclic nature is clearly the year. It's winter as it is outside right now. And so that low inventory level is the winter. But look what happened in that 2018-19 timeframe. Pre-COVID, this, remember. So in that time frame, and it's certainly at the end of 19 going in, end of 18 going into 19, all the discussion was around a recession. Was there going to be a housing correction? And so what we found is that sellers brought their homes on the market, hoping to beat the downturn, if you will. But buyers were somewhat reticent to buy, thinking perhaps there's going to be a correction, perhaps house prices are going to be somewhat lower, and therefore they were reticent to come into the market. And so what you saw over that winter period, 18-19, high inventory levels that really continued over the winter months, which is very unusual, as it really does follow that kind of cyclic nature. Inventory levels remained high in that end of 2019 too, but also as we got into 2020, you can see relatively high numbers, about where we were in 2014 and 15. Now we get to 2021, and there's a lot less inventory. If you kind of compare the two graphs of 20 versus 2021, a lot less inventory. So homes essentially are turning over quicker. And so that's what you see there. If we look at the number of home sales, that is the number of homes that sold over the last decade, you can see, forgetting 2012, that's kind of the end of the downturn. Once we got into the downturn, out of the downturn, I should say, 2013, and then really all the way through 2021, we saw a rise in the number of home sales to 2016. Really, this was buyers who were sellers who were unable to sell during the downturn, putting their homes on the market and those homes selling. So we're seeing a little bit of the after effect, if you will, of the downturn playing out until we get to 2016. And then the number of home sales came down. They're kind of averaging somewhere between 300 and 320. And that's really been the same all the way through, even through to 2021. So not that many more sellers, less sellers in the market, irrespective of market conditions, irrespective of prices, around about that same 300 to 320 sellers in the market really for the last, 5 years or so now, which is kind of interesting because I'll show you, as you'll see moving forward, that's kind of what the sellers are doing, but now we'll take a little look at what the buyers, because there are some great market conditions going on right now for those sellers who are thinking about selling. But let me kind of talk a little bit from a buyer's perspective, and then we'll get back to it from a seller's perspective. So, static number of home sales, but look at the average days on the market. Really been bumping along at around about 40, but then took a big drop in 2020 and a much bigger drop in 2021, down to about 23 days. You can get a little lower than that in some towns, but that's relatively low in comparison, half the number you were seeing back in that 2015-16 timeframe. So indicative of a very strong sellers market, lots of very confident buyers in the market. So large number of buyers, but as I mentioned before, a static number of sellers. Okay, let's now look at a ratio that really gives us a sense of buyer confidence. If we look at the ratio of the sale price to the list price, so imagine a home comes on the market at 600,000, it's sold for 600,000, that's 100% sale price to list price ratio. Now, you can see once we pull out of the downturn, it's been about 100% in Waltham for the last, about 8 years in there, I guess. But look what happened in 2021. We went from 100 to 103. Now, whilst that may not seem like a big jump, it actually is, because we haven't really seen any more than probably 1 percentage point in some year differences of 0.5%. So 3% is a big jump. And it really is indicative of buyers wanting to buy in the town, there not being enough inventory, and so they're bidding prices up. On average, about 3% over the list price. So that's very strongly indicative of lots of buyers, confident buyers looking to buy in that home. So essentially indicative of a strong seller's market. So lots of buyers in the market. That's what that 103 tells us. Interestingly, though, looking at that number, it seems relatively high, but I was thinking back when I was kind of pulling this data together, back in 2021, excuse me, get my years right, 2021, we listed a home actually on Tomlin Street. We got very much higher than that number. We got actually about 20% over the asking price. It was priced in the 600 price range, which is very, very, competitive for Waltham. But we got way, way over the asking price. And I was thinking about that, and actually we brought another one on Tomlin Street just 2 weekends ago now. And we got even higher than that in terms of the sell price to price ratio. And I was thinking about, why was that? Why did we get such a high sell price to list price ratio in comparison to the other home sales in the town? And it really comes down to what today's buyers are looking for. They're looking for move-in ready. When they've bought in the town at, say, 600 or 700,000, probably a first-time home buyer, they really don't have very much money left over. They're spending all they can on what they have to buy into the town, and there really isn't any money left over. And so when they see a home which is truly move-in ready, that they can move their suitcases in and I'm in, I don't have to do anything, I don't have to upgrade, maybe I will, in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, 4 years' time. But the day I move in and for the rest of this year and longer, I don't actually have to do anything. Once you present a home that way, that well, then buyers flock to it. So that 103 can easily be beaten. What you have to do, though, is really present the home, market the home well, and the buyers will flock to it if it's that move-in ready condition, if you like. So I thought that was kind of interesting to see that 103 and looking at what just two homes, on the same street. It was a great, good, nice comparison for us on Tomlin Street. The difference between what we got with great marketing, staging, and preparation, move-in ready, and actually what the market is able to do, overall. So interesting. If we look a little closer, and I mentioned a lot of these would be 10-year views. This is a 1-year view, a 13-month view, actually. You can see, and if I kind of highlight, the orange line there is the sell price to list price ratio. So as you can see, early in the year, it kind of rose as we got into that strong initial part of the season. There's about a 6-week delay between a home coming under agreement and selling, which is when we know when this data is. And then it dropped off, interestingly. And then the second half of the year, that ratio was around about 100%, actually, when we listed 50 Tomlin, as it turns out. So strong at the initial part of the year, but dropped off a little bit as the year progressed. Kind of interesting. So static number of sellers in the market, strong number of buyers looking to buy, in many cases being unable to buy, bidding those prices up because of the lack of inventory and the lack of listings. Inevitably, that means home prices went up. So this is the average sale price in Waltham. As you can see, here we are in 2021, and we're at 768. That's about, and look at my notes here a moment, that's about a 9% rise over what we saw in 2020. So 2020 to 2021, we saw about a 9% rise on top of about a 6.5% rise as you went into 2020. So that's a lot of price appreciation. And it's true of price appreciation. If you look at the distribution, there's no skew in there because more higher priced homes came on. So I would treat this as true price appreciation. We're looking at 9 plus 6, around about 15% price appreciation since that 2020, 2021. That should bring more sellers into the market as prices rise. So sellers begin to think now's a good time to sell, and so they tend to come in the market. But we're not really seeing that. So we have lots of buyers out there, but really not enough homes coming on the market, not enough willing sellers, if you will, or sellers. And so that's why you see that ratio going up to 103. The number of days on the market coming down to 23 days, and also why we were able to get such a great response to these two homes that I mentioned previously, that we brought on the same street in Waltham. So, but that's indicative of true price appreciation, about 15% over the last 2 years or so. Something similar with the medians. It's just the median data. There's about 5% rise in the median data, but you can see again a nice steady rise in terms of that median data too. The next graph looks at cumulative sales, and let me kind of explain a little why we did this and what this actually means. We were very interested as COVID came in, what the impact of COVID would be, and so we started tracking how many homes went under agreement, got an accepted offer essentially, by week. And so we plot by week how many homes went under agreement. So that's not sold, that's under agreement, because that's a direct measure as opposed to the 6 or 8 week delay we sometimes get between accepted offer and closing. So what we were looking at to see what would the impact of COVID be in terms of the shape of that graph. And so what I've shown here is 2020, which is the blue, and 2021, which is the kind of orange, pinky orange color. And you can see a kind of dip in the early part of the year of 2020, and then it responded quite strongly for the rest of the year. But as you look at 2021, it's almost a kind of straight line. And what's interesting about that is that we've lost the ordinary seasonality we have in the market, the so-called spring and fall market. That has disappeared in 2021. We would ordinarily expect to see a flattening of this curve in the summer because there are fewer homes coming on the market and therefore fewer homes getting accepted offers. But that's not the case. It is very much a kind of straight line. So that ordinary seasonality that we expect to see in the market really wasn't here in 2021. Now, we anticipate as we move forward that seasonality will come back into play, which will mean a strong spring market, and then a kind of slowdown in those summer months, a slight peak in the fall for the fall market, and then a flattening, which we kind of see at the end of the year here, but then a flattening as we come into the winter. So you don't see it in this data, but as we kind of move forward into 2022 and then 2023, anticipate that ordinary seasonality will kick back in, and we will see that kind of spring and fall market, which I say is very much missing from what you're looking at right now. So that's the single family home market. As I say, lots of buyers in the market, lots and lots of buyers in the market, but really not enough inventory to satisfy those buyers. Therefore, a strong seller's market. Days on the market comes down, sale price to list price ratio rises, kind of all indicative of very confident buyers and lots of buyers in the market looking to kind of raise the prices because there's just not enough homes to buy. Condominiums are a different story actually, which is why I kind of showed it here. So let's take a look at the condominium, similar graphs. First one to look at really the condominium sales. How many condominiums sold in Waltham in 2021? Comparison to other months. And as you can see there, that's a huge increase. That's about a 36% increase in condominium sales versus single family sales. Large increase, as you can imagine. What's interesting about that, if I now look at the sale price to list price ratio, we still got an over 100% ratio of the sale price to list price ratio. Remember, single families were at 103. Here we are with condominiums with about a 36% increase in the number of sales. So a lot of condominiums coming on the market. And we still managed to get 101% sale price to list price ratio. So that's indicative of quite a strong market. What that means, though, in terms of price is not as good as single family, essentially flat. So we've got a lot of condominiums coming on the market. Yes, there are a lot of buyers, but really because of that large increase in listings, satisfying today the number of buyers in the market, really, the buyers didn't feel it necessary to bid those prices higher. And so we didn't necessarily see any increase at all, as it turned out, in terms of the average sale price for condominiums. So not as strong a picture as we've seen with single family, where we saw that kind of 9% rise in prices. But still, given that we saw a large number of condominiums coming on the market, we still managed to keep prices about the same levels of 2020. So which is in a way a good point, because we could potentially have seen, as a lot of condos came on the market, that it saturated the market and therefore prices began to decline. So we didn't see that even with that large increase in terms of condos. So we'll say lots of condos, a large number of buyers, but really satisfying as many buyers as there were listings, really. We've also seen, on a kind of broader perspective here, condominiums really not performing as well as single family. In general, condominiums are cheaper. You can see here they are $562 is the average condominium price in the town. And so that price normally keeps condominiums and single families as popular as each other, just because they're at a lower price point and therefore are affordable by more buyers. But what we've seen broadly in the kind of areas that we look at, that condominiums have not performed as well in 2021 as single family across the board. Now, there are some reasons for this. There is certainly, if you think about what today's buyers are looking for, in general, they're looking for a little bit more space. Perhaps they want some more yard space. They're spending longer at home. I'll talk more about the kind of wider perspectives. And that changing requirements, condominiums don't necessarily fit that bill as well as single families. And so what we're finding is, even though they're at a lower price point and therefore more affordable and therefore more buyers can afford them, because they don't necessarily tick as many boxes, if you will, as single family homes do, they are less popular. So that's kind of the broader perspective in terms of condominiums. As we look at the cumulative graph, I have more to say about the changing market. We're beginning to see that seasonality kick in. And if I can kind of highlight that area here, strong growth in the spring market, and then a slight flattening there in the summer months. And then here's that fall market, and then it kind of tails off again as we get to the winter. So we're beginning to see the seasonality kick in the condominium market, less so in the single family, but we will begin to see this kick in, if you will, in 2022, stronger in 2023 in terms of that overall seasonality in single family too, as we begin to the market begins to normalize. So that's condominiums, certainly say not as strong a picture as single family. Let me quickly touch on new construction. There's a large amount of new construction in the town. I thought I'd kind of give you a sense of what's going on with that. I said there's a large amount. There's about twice as much as there was in 2020. So we had 28 sales in 2021 versus 16 in 2020. So you can see a large increase in terms of the number of new construction homes that are being built in the town. Which is the builders really saying, hey buyers, there is a lot of confidence in the builder community because there's a lot of confidence in today's buyers, and so the builders are building in the town to satisfy the large number of buyers that are out there. So it's really a kind of another proof point, if you will, that there are a lot of buyers in the market. The builders realize this and are now building new construction. Remember what I said about move-in ready? Clearly new construction is move-in ready, so it very much does appeal at a slightly higher price point, of course, than older homes, but still that's why we're seeing the builders feeling confident about the town, because the buyers are feeling confident about the town too. Interesting to look at sale price distribution. What this is the number of homes that sell in the different price points and how that's changed over the last 3 to 4 years. And what you can see here, if I can kind of highlight that, if we look at the 1 to 1.5 million, we had 7 homes in the 1 to 1.5 million. That's jumped from 7 to 15. So it's over double the number in there. But actually, as you can see, in the 1.5 to 2 and actually in the 2 to 2.5, which is a high price point for the town, we are beginning to see some new construction in 2021, whereas we saw none in previous years and actually just 1 in 2020. So The new construction moving into that 1 to 1.5 price point, that's where the builders see the buyers, what the buyers are willing to pay in that price point, and so that's where they're building. And so we have seen a shift in the distribution of new construction as the builders have decided to build at those higher price points. And you can see that too if you look at the average sale price. The average sale price really took quite a steep jump from just over $1 million in 2020, which is actually a little bit lower than we saw in 2019, actually to 1.25 basically in 2020. And that's a shift in distribution. Don't think that it is price appreciation unlike what we saw on the average sale price for single family. This really is the developers and the builders moving to a higher price point. And that's why you see that number increasing. Although I'd say it is indicative of that there is confidence in the builders that the buyers are out there and therefore willing to pay that kind of 1.2 on average price for a home, a new construction home in the town. So again, a kind of very much a proof point, if you will, in terms of the confidence that the buyers have in the town of Waltham. So let me take a quick look at what's kind of going on in the big picture here. Let me first of all take a look at price distribution, sale price distribution for single families, kind of all there. The blue, by the way, is existing homes, and the kind of light lime green is new construction. So 2020 is on the left-hand side, 2021 on the right-hand side. Similar shape, with the exception of what's going on in those much higher price points. But the overall shape of that graph very similar to what we saw in 2020, say with the exception of these higher price points, which are much higher. We have seen a little shift. We've gone from like 600,000s was 83, now it's 84, so basically the same. 700s were 67 and now they're 79. So you can see very much the same distribution with the exception of some confidence, if you will, in terms of the developers, in terms of building at those higher price points. That's what's kind of shifted it up there. This is why those two graphs are the same, and this is why we can say with some confidence that when we look at the average prices, that the average price increase, the appreciation, is true price appreciation. So that 9% is really what house prices have risen by. If this has been seen a major shift in the distribution, normally when we see this, it's at the higher price points. A lot more homes being built at the highest price points. Then some of that appreciation can be put down to the kind of skew of the data, if you will, the distortion of the data. But we can say with some confidence that 9% is true price appreciation. So just kind of wanted to bring that home as we look at the sale price distribution. Another kind of point that shows how strong the market can be, but also shows some of the variability in terms of home sales, is really the sale price to list price distribution. So what I've done here is taken each of those sale price to list price distributions and bucketed them in 1% ratios and plotted them. Now, the high point in the middle, there is 100%. So about 47 homes came on the market at sold for the same price as they came on the market for. But what's interesting is how many homes sold over that. Remember here that the average sale price to list price ratio was just about 103%. So that kind of second bar, there's the average. But look how many homes beat those odds, if you will. A large number of homes over. And in fact, about 70% of the homes sold for at or over the asking price. Which clearly begs the question, why did 30% sell for less? A number of reasons. I mean, first of all, overpricing, of course. That's the cardinal sin, if you will, is overpricing the home. Inevitably, if you do that, the home sits on the market longer and longer and longer, and the price goes down and down until the buyers see it as a bargain, at which point they'll come in and they'll buy the home. But also homes just not prepared for what today's buyers are looking for. You know, back to that move-in ready. how in those two examples I gave you, we very much beat that 103%. Substantially, we beat that 103%. And that's by having a home which is move-in ready. So we can say with some confidence that that 30%, perhaps overpriced, didn't have a product that today's buyers are looking for, move-in ready, prepared, staged, marketed. It just didn't meet their requirements, as it were. And so that price kind of dropped down as the buyers spurned buying that home and kind of went in only when the price had been reduced once or twice, perhaps sometimes even more. Still quite strong though. What we would ordinarily expect, and if you look at this data going back a number of years, it's usually about 50-50 actually. About 50% of homes sell for at or over the asking price and 50% sell for less. So clearly the fact that it's a very strong seller's market, lots of buyers in the market, has brought that ratio up to about 70% selling for at or over, but still 30% selling for less. So thought that was kind of interesting in terms of that kind of variability, both in terms of how the home is presented, how it's priced and marketed and so on. You can see it kind of play out in the data that you're looking at there. So what's going on in the kind of bigger picture here and what's driving the market? So a couple of big effects essentially. The first one really is changing housing demands. As we've moved into COVID for that matter, but now as we're pulling out of this era, not everybody's going back to the office. There are still a relatively large number of people who are working from home. Maybe it's not 5 days a week, maybe it's 3 days a week. And there's really a change in what buyers are thinking. They're thinking, or at least putting more emphasis on the home that they're going to live in. Whereas before, yes, they spent, they were in the office 5 days a week. There was a long commute. The home was still important, but perhaps not prioritized as much as it is today. And so we see why the single family home market has got that high priority. It got a little bit more space. It's got some yard. They're prioritizing the home higher than they have done previously. And so, homes don't meet their needs, for example. We have, as I mentioned, not necessarily in Waltham, but certainly in other towns, with rising prices, some more sellers are taking advantage of the higher prices to make a profit in terms of their market. But we're not seeing that very much in the Waltham market with a static number of sellers. But, some houses too big, some houses too small. It's really all about those changing requirements. And it's really those homes that begin to meet the requirement, the new requirements, if you will, in terms of today's buyers, that push that sell price to list price ratio into that kind of 70% bracket that I just showed you in the prior graph. So that's one of the big effects, really a kind of byproduct now of COVID, the kind of lingering changes that COVID has brought in terms of that changing, perhaps higher requirements that today's buyers have in terms of the house they're going to live in. As well as that, of course, the commute becomes less important. And so we've seen towns which historically didn't perform that well now beginning to perform very well. Certainly those which are perhaps a little bit further out, perhaps out by 495, for example. That was always, gosh, that's a long commute to do 5 days a week. Still a long commute, but if I've only got to do it 2 days a week or 3 days a week, perhaps it's I'm willing to kind of move out there and get a little bit more for my money. Remember, the further out you go, in general, the houses become more affordable. So we're also seeing that commute play in as well, so that towns which weren't really popular because of the commute now becoming back in popularity. So that's the big effect. But it's not just the changing home requirements that's driving the market. Prior to COVID, there was some demographic shifts which were beginning to play out in the market. And so what you see here is, it's called a population pyramid, and it's how many people are in which age group, got price on the brain here. Which age group, how many people in which age group. And there's two areas in there which are really important. I've highlighted those in yellow here. The top yellow band is the baby boomers, the children born after World War II, and now beginning to think about retirement and therefore beginning to think about downsizing, moving from the home they're in to the home their new, usually more affordable, smaller home. The lower yellow band are the first-time home buyers. They are looking to come out of their rentals, perhaps in Cambridge or Somerville or Boston, and move into their first home. And so that was driving the market. Downsizers selling their existing home, looking for a more affordable home. First-time home buyers looking to move up for a more affordable home. And when you think about the town of Waltham, it kind of begins to fit for both of those groups. For first-time home buyers looking to move into the town, it's more affordable than many of the towns around. I'm thinking of Belmont or Newton, for example. It's more affordable than those two towns, and therefore it was seen as a great destination. Lively town, great town centre, good commute with a commuter rail. So it begins to start ticking some boxes for those first-time home buyers. But also ticks the boxes for the downsizers too. Because here the downsizers in towns like Belmont, Newton, Lexington, maybe Winchester, Waltham is more affordable than those towns, and therefore it's a good destination for the downsize. And so that's why we've seen a relatively strong housing market in the town of Waltham over the last few years, and why it's kind of increased as well this year as more of those downsizers and more of those first-time home buyers look to move into the town. And that's where those buyers have kind of pushed that sale price to list price ratio to an average of 103. So that's the kind of underlying shift. And as the effects of COVID begin to diminish, as they inevitably will over time, this will still be there. These demographic shifts still have a few years to kind of work their way out. And so we will still see, as we did back in 16, 17, 2018, this become once again the more dominant factor in terms of how the house market will react over time. So, demographic shifts pushing it. I thought it'd be useful actually to look at the mortgage rates as well, because there's discussion about mortgage rates increasing. At what point will they increase? How much will they increase? But it's interesting to look at this graph here. The blue here is the actual average mortgage interest rates for 30-year fixed for the last, from 2021 back, about 10 or more years, actually to 2009. The green are the predictions. And as you can see, even with the predictions that we're seeing right now, we're still going to have historically low interest rates. Sure, they'll rise from 3.3 to 3.7, maybe even 4, but actually that's far less than we saw even in 2018. And so interest rates, whilst there's lots of discussion about them in terms of what it will mean to the market, we don't see them really being that much of an effect. There was some discussion when interest rates were much higher that it really would have to be at about 5 to 5.5% before they began to have a measurable impact on essentially buyers' ability to pay and therefore ability to buy. And so we see we're a long way away from that, where we are right now, and certainly through the rest of 2022 and into 2023. So what about this year, and what about kind of moving forward? As I mentioned before, we do see the normal seasonality beginning to come back in. We might begin to see it in 22, and certainly it will begin to come in 2023. Getting back to that spring fall market with a slower market in the summer months, that will come back in. We think we'll see that, so beginning in 22, probably more effective in 2023. So that will come back in. In terms of the number of sellers, we've seen a substantial price increase of about 9%. So they're really sellers today could come on the market if they wanted to, and they would make, if they're able to move, they would make a sizable profit on than where they would have even a few years ago. But we're not seeing that. And some of it, of course, is the difficulty in buying your next home. Inevitably, a seller, is usually a buyer of their next home. And so the fact that it's quite difficult to buy your new home because there are so many buyers in the market with those changing requirements means it's difficult for many sellers today, to actually sell because they don't know where to go. So we're seeing that static number of sellers we have for the last 3, 4, 5 years now. And so we see that static number of sellers continuing into 2023. So we expect to see about the same, between 300 and 320 home sales in 2022 moving forward. So just the number of buyers, there really is no end to the number of buyers, it seems anyway. There will clearly eventually, but right now that's not the case. There are lots of buyers in the market, and actually what we've seen, here we are in February, ordinarily this is a quiet time. We haven't had that much snow this year, which does have a measurable impact on how many buyers are in the market. But we are seeing a large number of buyers in the market right now. So we will continue to see, and actually I can give you an example of that. The home I talked about previously that we listed just a couple of weekends ago, we had 49 offers on that home. That's a huge number of offers. That's by far the highest we've seen on any home we've listed in the last few years. That says that there are, for example, 48 unsuccessful buyers who will be out next weekend and the weekend after and the weekend after that looking for homes. So there's a large number of buyers in the market and just not enough inventory to satisfy those buyers. And so we will begin to see as well as 2022 plays out, house price appreciation will continue to rise. That sell price to list price ratio will remain at those high levels just because the buyers will compete to buy those homes. What's key though, remember what I was saying about the kind of distribution there, that it really is important to get your home in a position that today's buyers find it attractive, because once they do, that's when you get that large number of offers. Move-in ready, presented well, marketed well, everything that today's buyers are looking for. Once you do that, that's when you'll get the response that we've seen and that inevitably you, the seller out there, wants. Not as good a picture for a buyer, of course. But it really is about creating that move-in ready, exactly what today's buyers are looking for, so they don't have to do anything when they move in. That's what will get you the highest price. So anticipate strong market in 2022. If you're a seller, anticipate a tough market in 2022 if you're a buyer, just because there are a large number of buyers out there and just not enough inventory to satisfy the requirements of those buyers. So that's our predictions for 22. Thank you for watching. Because the reason we do this really is that we really think our clients deserve to be the smartest person at the closing table. That's really what it's all about, and that we all really benefit from being smarter about home buying and selling. And that's why we kind of bring this education, if you will, for both buyers and sellers to you. And I hope you enjoyed what we talked about this evening. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. We have lots of information, not just about Waltham, but about a host of other towns too. So any questions, please reach out to us. We'd love to talk, as you can imagine. We do rather like talking about the real estate market. So if you have any questions, please do reach out to us. We'll be more than willing to sit down and talk you through exactly what's going on and how we can kind of satisfy your requirements, as it were, in terms of both selling and or buying. So with that, I'll say thank you, and thanks for watching, and good night. Bye.